Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Appearance panel in Adobe Illustrator. I think this panel is often overlooked because people don't realize what all it can do, and they don't know how to use it. And then to make it even more confusing, Illustrator doesn't treat text and objects the same way in the Appearance panel. So stick with me until the end to find out what all those differences are. Now, if you've just stumbled on my channel for the first time, I want to say welcome. I've been posting tutorials for almost 2 years now, and I have over 15 hours of free training on Illustrator right here in YouTube. Now, I regularly post, so be sure and subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future tutorials. All right, now I want you to grab something to take notes with, and let's get started. There are 3 ways for us to access the Appearance panel. You can either go up to Window, down to Appearance, and click here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Shift F6, or if you have something, either an object or text selected on the artboard, you can access it in the Properties panel. So let's do that. I'm going to get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag out a rectangle. Let's give it a green fill and a 5-point stroke. Now that it's selected, I'll come back over to the Properties panel, and in the Appearance area, I'll click on the ellipsis, and that opens the Appearance panel. I'm going to move this up and out of the way. Now, unlike the Layers panel, which places every single object on the artboard in the panel and on a separate layer, the Appearance panel only deals with one object at the same time, but it does use layers as well. The layers in the Appearance panel are for each attribute that the object has. So in this particular example, we have a layer for the stroke and we have a layer for the fill. But the cool thing about the Appearance panel is you can actually add strokes and add fills to one individual object. And I'm going to show you how to do all that, but first let's look at the Appearance panel itself and see what its various components are. Now in the top left corner, we have the thumbnail of the object that is selected on the artboard. It tells us this is a path. But if I get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I click on the artboard to deselect the object, you're still going to see the thumbnail. It does tell us there's no selection, but if there's nothing selected, the thumbnail is going to be the last object which was selected. Now that's going to be important for us to be aware of, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Next, we have our eyeball column on the left. This is the Show Hide column, and when we toggle these eyeballs on and off, we ought to be able to hide and show the various attributes of the object. But notice when I click on the eyeball, nothing happens, and that's because the object is not selected. So when you're working on an object and you want to make changes in the Appearance panel, make sure you're not seeing no selection. Click to select the object, and then when you click on an eyeball, you're going to be making changes. When I click on the eyeball, the stroke is hidden. When I come back and click in this space again, I have the eyeball back and you see the stroke. And we can do that for every single layer in the Appearance panel. In this wider column on the right, we have the description of each of the layers. So we see this is a 5-point black stroke and this is a green fill. Now, just like the Layers panel, the layers in the Appearance panel are part of a hierarchy. And the best way that I can explain that is to show you. So I'm going to open the Layers panel and I'll twirl this open. We have our green rectangle here, but I'm going to add some more rectangles, and I need to make them different colors so we can tell them apart. Now let's go back to the Layers panel, and we see the 3 rectangles, each on their own layer. Green was created first, so it's at the bottom. Every time you add an object, it goes above the ones before it. Well, our red rectangle, which is at the top of the list, is not only on top of the yellow and the green in the list, it's also going to be on top of those rectangles on the artboard. I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and let me just move this over and show you the red rectangle is in front of the yellow and the green rectangle. But I can change that by grabbing it in the Layers panel and moving it. So I'm going to drag it between the yellow and the green, and you can see now red is higher than the green, so it's in front of the green, but it's lower than the yellow, so it's going to be behind the yellow on the artboard. Understanding that hierarchy can be very helpful when you're working with projects and using the layers panel, and I have an entire video that's devoted to that, which I'll link at the end of this tutorial. But it's critical to understand when you're using the appearance panel. So I'm going to delete these two rectangles, and I'll select our green to get back where we were, move back over to the properties panel. Now we're accustomed to changing the fill color and the stroke color and the weight of the stroke in the properties panel, but we can make those changes in the appearance panel as well. To change the fill color, all I do is click on the icon for the fill color, and I'll click here to open up the swatches panel, and I can just change to whatever color I want. And I can do the same thing with the stroke color. I'll click here and let's make this a dark purple, and then I'll click on the points to change the weight, and we're going to bring it all the way up to 10 points. Now let's talk about strokes for a minute. The default setting for strokes in Illustrator is to center them along the outer edge of their object. I'm going to zoom in here to let you see what I'm talking about. We have the object, and you can see this little blue line, which is showing us the outside edge of the object. If I hide the stroke, you can see right exactly where it is. So with the stroke centered over the object at 10 points, 5 points of the stroke is going to be covering this object, and 5 points of the stroke is going to be outside of the object. Now we learned about hierarchy a minute ago, so let me show you what happens if I grab hold of the stroke and I drag it underneath the fill color. We see 5 points on the outside of the stroke, and 5 points of the stroke is going to be hidden because it's underneath the fill. Now we can change that alignment by clicking on the word stroke. We have 3 different options. The first one is the default setting. This is where it's centered over the object. The second option is to align the stroke to the inside of the object. So when I click here, the stroke is aligned to the inside of the object, and you can't see it because it's underneath the fill color. Then the last option is to align the stroke to the outside of the object. So when I click here, even though the stroke is underneath the fill color, because it's aligned to the outside, we see the full 10 points of our stroke. That's why understanding the hierarchy is really important. Now I'm going to go back to the default setting for right now and click on the artboard to close that out. And now I'll zoom back out, keyboard shortcut Command 0. Well, in addition to changing the colors and the weight of the stroke, we have some other options that we can change. One of them is the opacity of our objects. Now, we know we can change the opacity of the entire object in the Properties panel, but did you know that you can change the opacity of just the fill color and leave your stroke at 100%? I love that option, and I use it all the time. To change just one attribute, we'll click here on the left side of the description, and here's where we change the opacity. I'm going to click on the word, and I have a pull down menu, and I can either click here and move the slider on the slider bar, or I can just type in a value here and press the return key. Now what I have is a 50% opacity on the fill color. My stroke is still 100%, but look what happens. Because our stroke is centered on the object, half of it is behind that fill color, and because the fill color is at 50%, we can see through. So when you change the opacity, you're going to want to change the alignment of the stroke, and I suggest that you change it to align the stroke to the outside. Then you have your opacity at 50% on your fill color, and you're not seeing any of the stroke through there. Now you have the ability on every single layer to change the opacity, but I want to caution you that if you click on the opacity on the very bottom layer, you're going to change the opacity of all of the attributes when you type in a value. I'm going to change the opacity here back to 100% and press the return key. I'll also close these layers and select our object on the artboard, then let's take a look at the bottom bar of the Appearance panel. Now, I don't have any layers selected in the Appearance panel, so when I come over to the bottom left icon, which is the Add New Stroke icon, and I click here, Illustrator is going to add an exact copy of the previous stroke and place it at the top of the list. But if I'd had a layer selected in the Appearance panel, Illustrator would have placed the new stroke right above that layer. Let me show you. I'll first undo that move, keyboard shortcut Command Z. Then I'll select the stroke layer and we'll repeat the process. I'll click on the Add New Stroke, and this time Illustrator adds the stroke on top of the layer that I had selected. So when no layer is selected, the new layer goes to the top of the list. If you have a layer selected, then the new layer is going to go right on top of it in the list. Now, we're not able to see the stroke that we've added because it's the same color, it's the same size, and it's in the same location. In fact, it even has the same alignment to the outside of the object. But we've learned that the strokes that are on top in the list are in front on the artboard. So if we want both of these strokes to show, we're going to have to make the bottom stroke larger and change its color. So I'm going to come to the bottom stroke layer, click on the color icon, open up the swatches panel, and let's choose orange for the color. And then I'll increase the weight of the stroke to 20 points, and now we see it on the artboard. Now we're only seeing 10 points of the orange stroke because 10 points of it is behind the purple stroke. If we want to see all 20 points of that orange stroke, I'm either going to have to change the alignment of the purple stroke to the inside of the object, or I can move the orange stroke in front of the purple stroke, but we won't see it at all. Let's first move it to the front. I'll grab hold of the orange stroke and drag it in front of the purple stroke. So now you see 20 points of that stroke, but the purple stroke is hidden. To make the purple stroke visible, I click on the layer and I'll click on the word stroke and change the alignment to align stroke to inside, and now we would see that stroke, but remember, I have to have the object selected, and that's so easy to forget. So now that I have this selected, I can come back over again, click on stroke, and change the alignment to align stroke to inside, but we still can't see it because the purple stroke is under the fill color. So we're going to have to grab hold of the purple stroke and drag it above the fill color. Now I hope you're getting the idea of how this works with the hierarchy of these layers. And once you understand that, there is no limit to the number of strokes you can add to one single object. Let's move on to the second icon. This is the Add New Fill icon, and it works on the same principle as adding a stroke. And I'm going to wait until we get to dealing with text to explain this, as well as explaining the next icon, which is the Add New Effect icon. When I click here, I have all sorts of effects that I can add to my attributes, but we'll do that when we come to the text. Now I'm going to go back, make sure that my object is selected, and let's look at this next icon. It's the clear appearance icon, and when I click here, I'm going to end up with an object that has no fill color and no stroke, and I don't want that, so I'm going to undo the move, keyboard shortcut Command Z. Now these last two icons are grayed out, and that's because I have to have an object selected in the Appearance panel for them to work. So let's come up and click on the purple stroke. Now we see the square with the plus sign in it. This is the Duplicate Selected Item icon. When I click this, we're going to be duplicating the attribute that's selected in the Appearance panel. So I'll click here and you can see that Illustrator has added a stroke. And if I change the color, then you can see this is on top. Let's make it just a little bit smaller. And now we can see the purple stroke not only on the list, but also under the red stroke on the artboard. All right, I have this new stroke that I've added, selected. I'll come down here and here's the trash can. This is going to delete the selected item. It's not going to delete the entire object on the artboard. It's going to delete the attribute that's selected in the appearance panel. So when I click on the trash can, it's gone. Now let's move to the top right corner. I'll click here and open this up. We've already talked about add new fill and add new stroke. Duplicate item and remove item are grayed out here like they were down here because I don't have a layer selected in the appearance panel. I can also clear the appearance, which is this little icon here, and I can reduce to basic appearance. Let's click here and see what happens. This time we move back to our original object, which had one fill and one stroke. I'm going to undo that move, keyboard shortcut Command Z. We'll come back up and look at the rest of these. The next one is New Art, has basic appearance, and I never mess with this at all. Next, we have Hide Thumbnail, and I don't ever click that because I always want to see the object that I'm working with on the artboard. And then we have Redefine Graphic Style. This is grayed out because I didn't use a graphic style to create this object, and we'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. And the last one is Show All Hidden Attributes. If I had one of these layers hidden by just clicking on the eyeball, and I come over here and I click on Show All Hidden Attributes, Illustrator is going to reveal all of the different attributes, even the ones I had hidden by clicking on the little eyeball. Well, before we move on to looking at text in the appearance panel, I'm going to make a couple of changes to the strokes with our object. The first thing I'll do is change the color of the purple stroke. Let's change this to white, and I'm going to change the alignment of the stroke to Align Stroke to Center. Then I'm going to come down and click on the Add New Stroke icon. The top stroke is going to be the front stroke on the artboard, so I need to work with the bottom white stroke. I'll click on that white stroke, and we're going to change the color to black, and then we'll increase the weight of the stroke to 14 points. And when I click to deselect the object on the artboard, we see a nice 2-point stroke on the outside and the inside of our white stroke. Now, if we want to add a black stroke around our orange stroke, let's select the object, click on the orange stroke, and come down and click on the Add New Stroke icon. We're going to work with the bottom stroke. I'm going to change this to black, and I'm going to increase the size to 22 points. That gives me 2 points on the outside, and we see these 2 points showing because our strokes are both aligned to the outside. Well, now that you've learned the basics about using the appearance panel with objects, let's turn our attention to how Illustrator treats text in the appearance panel. I'll select the rectangle and delete it, and then get the Type tool, keyboard shortcut T. I'll come over to the Properties panel and change the font to Barbieri, change the weight to 200 points, and then click on the artboard to get some placeholder text, and I'll just type over that. Let's get my name here, get the Selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to change the fill color now to, let's do this green, and increase the stroke size to 3 points. Now we see the changes I've made reflected on the artboard, but not in the appearance panel. For some reason, Illustrator doesn't pick up the attributes of text when we have it selected on the artboard. Now I can double click the word characters here. Now the attributes each have layers in the appearance panel, but we're not going to be able to manipulate them. The eyeballs are grayed out, and these little icons are all grayed out. So we have to make changes before we can actually work with the attributes in the appearance panel with our text. I'll get the Selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and with the text still selected, even though we don't see the black stroke and the green fill, I now have access to the icons. So let's click on this Add New Stroke, and I'm going to change the color here to blue, and let's increase this to 10 points. And our blue stroke is on top of the black, so I'm going to move this down under the word characters since I'm not even seeing the black stroke listed. Now you see the blue stroke, but if I click on the word stroke, I can't even change the alignment here. So this isn't the solution we want. I'm going to go ahead and delete the stroke. And let's move to the left toolbar where I have a representation of the fill color and the stroke color of the text that's selected on the artboard. Now, in order to see my text in the appearance panel, I'm first going to have to remove the attributes, both the stroke and the fill color, and then add them back in through the appearance panel. Now right now, the stroke icon is in front of the fill icon, which means the stroke is the active attribute. Now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut /, and when I press that, because the stroke is the active attribute, it removed the stroke from my text. Now to toggle back and forth between the stroke being the active attribute and the fill color, I can either use the keyboard shortcut X, and see now the fill icon is on top of the stroke icon, or I can just merely click on the one that's underneath and that brings it to the front. But I need the fill icon in the front. I need it to be the active attribute because I've also got to remove the fill color. So once again, I'm going to press / on my keyboard. Now I've removed both the fill color and the stroke color from my text. The text is still there, we just can't see it. Let me close this out right here. We don't have a change yet in the appearance panel, but we're about to because we're going to add those two attributes back in. I'll come to the bottom of the appearance panel and click on Add New Stroke. Here's my stroke. I want to go back to the 3 points, so I'll just increase this to 3 points. Now, even though I only added a stroke layer, Illustrator has also added a fill layer because we can't have one without the other. Now, I'm going to click on the color icon here and twirl this open. Let's come back and choose our green. Now I'm back where I was when I created the text, with one exception. I now have the attributes appearing in the appearance panel and I'm able to access them. So now we'll play with these layers. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the stroke color here, and then I'll come down to this bottom bar and click on Add New Fill. We'll click here. Illustrator adds a fill layer to the top of the list, and it is exactly the same as the other fill layer we have with the green color. We know the bottom fill color on the list is going to be the back fill layer on the artboard, so that's the one I'm going to work with. I'll choose black for the color. Then I'm going to apply a special effect just to this black fill. So I'll come to the bottom bar, click on the Add New Effect icon, and this opens up a lot of different choices for me with different effects. I'm going to come up and choose Distort and Transform, and then Transform. This is going to open up a big dialog box, and I'm not going to change everything. I'll leave the scale alone, but I am going to make some changes here. Let's type in 0.06 and tab down and type 0.06. I'll leave the angle the same. I want to make sure these 3 options are all checked, and then let's say OK. Now I'll click to deselect our text, and we immediately have a really nice drop shadow on our text. And the great thing about this is my text is still completely editable. So I'll select it and type over it. You can see I still have the effect, but I'm able to edit the text. And that's the great thing about using the appearance panel. And we can add even more changes. I'm going to add another stroke. It goes to the top of the list, but we don't see the stroke reflected on the artboard. Why? Because we didn't have the text selected first. So I'll select the text, then come down and click on the Add New Stroke. We have the 1 point stroke. I'm going to change the color to white. It's on top, and I'm really liking how this has turned out. Now, just know you can make all the other changes we talked about with objects in the appearance panel with your text as well. It's just understanding how to get the text to where you can work with those attributes. Now, let's say that you wanted to use this effect in a number of different places for a project, rather than having to take your text each time and go through all of these transitions. We can save this text as a graphic style and apply it to anything else that we create in the future. Let me show you how to do that. I'll come up to Window, down to Graphic Styles. I can also open it with the keyboard shortcut Shift F5. I'll grab this window and dock it under the Appearance panel, then I'll select my text and drag and drop it into that Graphic Styles panel, and that's all I have to do. Now I'm going to delete my text. I'll get the Type tool, keyboard shortcut T. I'll change the font to Arial, and let's change the size to 150. Press the return key, and then click on the artboard for some placeholder text, and I'll type in Susan, and then all I have to do is come down and click on the graphic style I want to apply, and the effect is applied to the new text. It doesn't change the font, but it applies the color and all of those other attributes which we had on our original text and saved in the graphic styles panel. Now I'm going to select the text, and I'm going to change the fill color. Let's click here and make this blue instead. And now I'll show you an option that I couldn't show you before. I'll come up to the top right corner, click here, and this time redefine graphic style is not grayed out, and that's because we created the text, we applied a graphic style, and then we made a change. So if I click redefine graphic style, I change the graphic style in the styles panel. So that's how that works as well. Now let's take just a few moments and review how the hierarchy works. I'll select the text and move over to the Appearance panel, and we have each of the attributes of the text listed in the order that they are on the artboard. The white one-point stroke is on top. If I click on the eyeball, I'm going to hide that, and I'm left with just the original letters and the black drop shadow. If I come over and hide the black drop shadow, I'm left with the original letters. Now move over to the Layers panel and hide this layer and bring back our object. I'll select the object, and we'll look at the Appearance panel with each of its attributes. The white 10-point stroke is on top, so it's hiding most of the black 14-point stroke. If I hide the white 10-point stroke, you're able to see all of that black 14-point stroke. I'm going to hide that as well so that you can see the outer edge of our object. Underneath it, I have a 20-point orange stroke, but you see all of it because it's aligned to the outside of the object. And then underneath the orange stroke, I have a black 22-point stroke. It also is aligned to the outside, so I'm seeing 2 points of it. It looks like a very thin stroke until I hide the orange 20-point stroke, and then you see its full size. So if you'll take the time to play around with these attribute layers and learn how to manipulate them and add them and move them around in the hierarchy, you're going to find yourself creating some really cool artwork with the Appearance panel. And one last little tidbit of information. I'm going to select our object and drag it into the Graphic Styles panel. We can use graphic styles with both text and with objects. So I can apply the graphic style that I created with my text on the object, and I can use the graphic style which I created with my object on my text. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and you've learned how valuable the Appearance panel can be in your projects. I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future tutorials, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.